In a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Ibadan, there lived a 72-year-old grandmother known to everyone as Mama Grace. Her small house, built with old cement blocks and a rusted zinc roof, stood at the end of a narrow, dusty road. The paint on the walls had faded over the years, just like the photographs hanging inside. But even in its worn-out state, the house carried memories of laughter, love, and better days. Years ago, Mama Grace and her husband had run a modest provision shop together. It wasn't big, but it was enough. Customers trusted them. Children often stopped by after school to buy biscuits and sweets. In the evenings, she and her husband would sit outside the shop, talking about their dreams for their children and the future they hoped to build. Life wasn't luxurious, but it was peaceful. Everything changed the day her husband fell ill. Hospital visits became frequent. Savings slowly disappeared. The strong man who once lifted heavy bags of rice with ease could barely sit up in bed. Mama Grace stayed by his side through it all, praying, hoping, believing in a miracle. But one quiet morning he took his last breath, leaving her holding his hand in a hospital room that suddenly felt too silent. After his passing, the shop struggled. Without his strength and support, restocking became difficult. Debts piled up. Suppliers refused to give goods on credit. Within months, the shop closed. The wooden door that once welcomed customers remained locked. It felt like locking away a chapter of her life. Relatives who used to visit during festive seasons stopped coming. Phone calls became rare. The house grew quieter each day. At night, the sound of crickets outside seemed louder than ever. Mama Grace often sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her husband's photograph, her heart heavy with questions she couldn't answer. But what troubled her most was not her loneliness, it was her grandchildren. Her daughter, struggling in another city, had sent the children to live with her temporarily. Temporary turned into permanent. School fees needed to be paid, uniforms were torn, books were missing pages. The children tried not to complain, but she could see the worry in their young eyes. One rainy evening, as water leaked through a small hole in the roof, Mama Grace sat in the dim light of a kerosene lamp. The children were asleep on a thin mattress beside her. She listened to the rain hitting the zinc roof and felt tears roll down her cheeks. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of everything, the loss, the fear, the uncertainty. Then she wiped her tears. "I cannot give up," she whispered into the darkness. The next morning, she woke up before sunrise. Her joints ached, and her back protested every movement, but she moved with quiet determination. She counted the little money she had left and made a decision. If she could not reopen the provisions shop, she would start small, very small. She borrowed a neighbor's stove and bought beans on credit from a nearby market. Her plan was simple: fry akara and sell it by the roadside. It was not the life she imagined at her age, but pride would not feed her grandchildren. As she mixed the beans paste with trembling hands, memories flooded her mind, the years of comfort, the laughter she once shared with her husband. But instead of breaking her, the memories strengthened her resolve. She tied her wrapper firmly around her waist, covered her gray hair with a scarf, and stepped outside. The first day was not easy. Standing by the roadside under the hot sun, she felt exposed and vulnerable. Some people walked past without looking at her. A few bought from her out of sympathy. By the end of the day, she had made only a small profit. It wasn't much, but it was something. When she returned home, the children ran to her. "Grandma, how was today?" they asked. She smiled, even though her legs were sore. "Today was a beginning," she replied. That night, as she lay on her thin mattress, exhaustion filled her body, but hope filled her heart. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt a small spark of purpose. Life had knocked her down, but she had chosen to stand. And in that small house at the end of the dusty road in Ibadan, a new chapter quietly began. Every day after that, Mama Grace woke up at 4 a.m. before the first rooster crowed. The world was still dark and silent when she stepped into her tiny kitchen. She soaked beans overnight to soften them, then peeled them patiently at dawn. Her fingers, once smooth and strong, were now wrinkled and stiff, but they worked with steady determination. The charcoal stove crackled as hot oil filled the air with a familiar scent. She carefully scooped portions of bean paste into the bubbling oil. The akara puffed up golden and round. Sometimes the smoke made her eyes water, but she kept going. By sunrise, she would arrange the akara neatly in a plastic bowl, cover them with a clean cloth, and carry them to her usual roadside spot. Some mornings were kind. Workers heading to offices stopped to buy breakfast. School children smiled and greeted her politely, but other days were painfully slow. She would sit on a small wooden stool, watching cars drive past, hoping someone would stop. A few people questioned her. "Grandma, shouldn't you be resting at home?" they would ask. She would respond gently, "Resting is good, but responsibility is greater." Her greatest worry was school fees. One afternoon, her grandson came home with a letter from school. He handed it to her quietly. She read it slowly, her heart sinking. The deadline for payment was near. That night, she barely slept. She calculated her earnings over and over, realizing it wasn't enough. Still, she refused to let the children see her fear. She encouraged them to study hard, reminding them that education was their ladder out of hardship. "Your books are your future," she would say firmly. Despite her struggles, she remained kind. If a hungry child had no money, she sometimes gave one akara for free. "God will provide," she would whisper to herself afterward. Her body grew tired, but her spirit grew stronger. Each day she survived felt like a small victory. Each coin she saved carried hope. She discovered that strength is not loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is simply showing up again and again, even when life feels heavy. Through exhaustion and uncertainty, Mama Grace learned something powerful. Resilience is built in ordinary moments of courage. And though no one applauded her daily sacrifices, she knew deep inside that she was fighting a battle worth winning. One particularly hot afternoon, as the sun blazed fiercely over Ibadan, Mama Grace felt unusually weak. Sales had been slow, and she had not eaten since morning. She adjusted her scarf and wiped sweat from her face, determined to stay until evening. It was on that day that something unexpected happened. A young journalist from Channels Television was driving through the area, working on a story about small-scale traders. He noticed the elderly woman standing under the scorching sun, carefully arranging her akara with quiet dignity. There was something about her composure that made him stop. He approached her politely and bought some akara. As they spoke, he gently asked about her life. At first, she hesitated. She was not used to sharing her struggles with strangers, but his respectful tone reassured her. She told him about her late husband, the closed shop, and her grandchildren. She did not exaggerate her suffering. She spoke calmly, even smiling at times. "Life is not always easy," she said softly, "but we must keep moving." The journalist was deeply touched. He asked for permission to record her story. She agreed, not expecting much to come from it. For her, it was just another conversation in a long day. A few days later, her story aired on the evening news. Viewers across Nigeria watched the elderly grandmother who refused to surrender to hardship. Her quiet strength resonated with thousands. The response was overwhelming. People began calling the television station asking how they could help. Donations, both small and large, started pouring in. Local community members visited her roadside stand, offering words of encouragement. Some bought akara in bulk just to support her. When the journalist returned to tell her about the reaction, she was stunned. Tears filled her eyes as he explained that strangers had been moved by her perseverance. For years, she had felt invisible. Now, people saw her. Soon, a local business owner offered to help her rent a small shop space. Others contributed to paying her grandchildren's school fees. What once seemed impossible slowly became reality. Mama Grace wept again, but these were different tears. They were tears of gratitude, relief, and renewed faith. She realized that sometimes enduring quietly can inspire loudly. Her story reminded people that dignity in hardship is powerful.